Hi friends, thank you for tuning in to the Concussion Coach podcast. I'm Bethany Lewis, the Concussion Coach. I'm a neurological occupational therapist and certified life coach, and I specialize in guiding people through their concussion recovery journey. I am passionate about helping people understand their injury, speed up their recovery, and reclaim control over their life post-concussion. The purpose of this podcast is to help increase awareness of concussions and the impact they can have on a person's life, and to bring hope to people who have suffered a concussion and those who love them. I firmly believe that sharing stories and knowledge about concussions will bring important light and understanding to this misunderstood and often invisible injury. The information in this podcast is meant to bring that awareness and hope and is not meant as medical advice. The opinions shared are those of the interviewees and my own. If you are suffering with lingering concussion symptoms, I have created a concussion coaching program specifically for you. I will be your mentor to guide you through your recovery journey, offering help with understanding and managing your symptoms, setting achievable goals, and learning how to manage your own thoughts and nervous system in order to get control over your life again. If this program sounds like something that would help you or someone you love, sign up for a free consultation. In the consultation, you'll get valuable information and resources and gain hope for your future. Sign up for your free consultation at the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Hi friends, welcome back to another episode. Today's interview is unique because in this one, I am the one being interviewed. My friend Wendy Parrish has an amazing podcast called Messages from the Middle. It is focused on mental health and is called Messages from the Middle because she is still on her mental health journey and is using the podcasting platform to share her learnings, insights, and experiences along the way. Even though she addresses fairly heavy topics such as depression, anxiety, and her experience with an inpatient treatment center, she's genuinely funny and has a beautiful way of expressing herself. She invited me onto her podcast because she knows that concussions can impact mental health since she and some of her children have experienced them. We had a great discussion about post-concussion syndrome and how mental health can be impacted by a head injury. Enjoy listening in on our discussion and check out her podcast to listen to her other episodes. I've gained genuinely helpful insights into mental health through her openness and vulnerability on her podcast. And besides all that, her voice is really nice to listen to. So be sure to check out Messages from the Middle and enjoy this interview with Wendy Parrish.
Hello and welcome to the episode. I'm so excited you're here today because we've got a really great episode in store. Today, I am interviewing my friend, Bethany Lewis, who I have known for about 2 years. Bethany is a neurological occupational therapist, which is so cool, and a certified life coach through the Life Coach School. She has specific training in nervous system resilience. She has worked as an occupational therapist since 2009 and has helped hundreds of patients with concussions and other brain injuries through her work at Cognitive FX, a cutting-edge concussion clinic in Provo, Utah. During her career, she has seen the effects head injuries can have on people's lives and the lives of those who love them, and has seen people experience healing and recovery from many severe symptoms. She provides tools such as nervous system regulation techniques and intentional thinking that can have enormous impact on recovery and people's well-being. She combines her knowledge of post-concussion symptoms and coaching into a unique and powerful coaching program to help her people with lingering concussion symptoms speed up their recovery and take control of their lives. I have wanted to interview Bethany before I even started this podcast because I knew that she worked with concussions, and I have seen firsthand the effect that concussions have on mental health because they actually can cause anxiety and dysregulation. And also, when you have an illness, and especially an invisible illness, it affects your everyday life in a way that's really hard to describe, and other people don't understand why. And when things affect your everyday life, that affects your mental health. I hope you get a lot of value and information from this podcast. I also want to let you know that Bethany also has a podcast called The Concussion Coach. Check it out. She has some really great interviews on her podcast as well. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. Hello, and I am with my guest. This is Bethany Lewis. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good. It's so good to see you. So Bethany, I met her at Be Bold Masters. That was 2021, wasn't it?
It was.
Wow. In the
Crazy.
fall.
It's almost 2 years exactly.
Almost 2 years. And she was in my group, and Jody Moore, we'll name drop. She said that whatever group you're in is the best group. And she was 100% right with our group. We have the best group and just the most incredible people. So
It's
I
true.
have Bethany on today because she is the concussion coach. And I have, after one of my son's many concussions, started doing a little concussion research. Definitely know that concussions cause issues with mental health. And knowing that Bethany specializes in concussions, I thought we definitely need to have her on to talk about concussions, mental health, all the things. So, yeah, I love that you do this. This is necessary and important because
Thank you.
I think everyone has a concussion from something at some point in their life.
I know, right? Yes. I didn't know anything about concussions before I started working at the clinic that I work at. And it blew my mind to realize how impactful it could be. Like, it can completely turn a person's life upside down, and it's considered a quote unquote mild traumatic brain injury. So it's,
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy. And
I think
really, I think it's really important to talk about.
and I think that most people think of like the major concussions, the blackouts, the knockouts or whatever as being big, but it can be depending on, when and where or how it was done. It can be pretty significant even if you don't really even, you know, remember even hitting your head.
Yeah, and
So,
you don't even have to hit your head to get a concussion, which is crazy. Like, yeah, so like it can happen just from your brain being jostled around inside your skull. So if like whiplash or a quick, if
mhm.
your body stops moving and your brain hasn't stopped moving yet, it that can do it. So yes, it can last, and the severity, quote unquote, severity of the mild concussion, mild TBI, doesn't impact whether or not you have lingering symptoms. It can happen even if it's a small hit to the head. Not necessarily, doesn't have to be one where, like you said, where you've been knocked out completely.
Yeah. That was the thing that kind of blew my mind when I realized that the brain can keep moving. And so even
Hmm.
like the skull that's meant to protect the brain, which, does a pretty good job. We'd be worse off
Yeah,
without
it
it,
does.
is what can cause the concussion. Like it'll hit the skull.
Hmm.
Which I thought that was very crazy. When it comes to, I guess, symptoms of a concussion, or I guess my question is, are we thinking about like any kind of neck trauma, head trauma? Like, what are some things to really consider? Like, I probably have a concussion from this. Does that make sense? Because, like I was just saying, I think a lot of people only think you have to have like been significantly like see stars or knocked out, or even just kind of feel a bonk to the head. Like, what really should we be looking for?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a concussion, like we said, is just when your head gets jostled around inside, or you've had a hit to the head. And what happens is the tiny blood vessels in your brain get impacted, and so then areas of your brain are not getting the blood flow that they are used to getting and that they need to get to effectively function. So if you've had a concussion, there are things that you may experience initially, and hopefully they'll go away. I think most of the time people do heal from concussions on their own, but if it can turn into what they call post-concussion syndrome or post-concussion symptoms, where you have lingering things that last typically beyond 3 months. I think is
Okay.
generally, if
So the
it's
beyond 3
3 months
months
and
is
you're
kind of
still, mhm,
okay.
then it's classified as post-concussion syndrome. And so at that point, there are things that you can be doing, but initially, I think your question was about what to be looking for. Symptoms that people might experience is, headaches. That's like, I think, a classic one that people would think to look for. Headaches or dizziness, nausea, um, vision concerns, like not being able to look far away and back again, and you might feel dizzy from doing that. Or reading could be difficult all of a sudden. It either gives you a headache, or you can't follow the line on the page, or you can't remember what you read, or it just makes you super tired. The fatigue piece, almost doing anything can make you really, really tired because your brain isn't functioning properly. And
Mhm.
the brain is amazing. Basically, what it does with a concussion is, since the normal pathways aren't working properly, it figures out other pathways to still get the same task done. But it's very circuitous and not efficient. And so basically, you're using other areas of the brain to accomplish the same task that the other areas should be doing. And so it's just really, really inefficient and lots of symptoms can happen from it, and you just get exhausted. So things that used to not be tiring at all are all of a sudden totally exhausting. Yeah, I don't know. Do you want me to keep going on all the symptoms? There's
No, I
a
think,
lot of things to look
well,
for.
I was going to say, I think that's, well, and so I guess like what you said, so if somebody, hits their head, they have some headaches, some, symptoms for a while, but if they go away at that point, you kind of know you're okay. Or is it kind of like you need to get to that 3 month, and if it's still just getting bad or even getting worse, do they tend to get worse sometimes? Does that make
They can get worse. It can
Okay.
be, so yeah, it can be, it's crazy because sometimes people will not even realize they might not experience symptoms for a while. Like you can go for a little while and then all of a sudden start having symptoms show up. And so sometimes can be confusing and not easily linked to the concussion. Like you can start having all these things that people might not recognize as concussion symptoms, that are coming far enough after that you don't automatically associate it with having had the concussion. But as far as like when you do first have the concussion, there are things that you can do and should do, I think. And then again, if you're still having symptoms showing up or continuing after 3 months, then there's more treatment, more help that you can be getting. But initially, I would say a good thing to do would be to get checked out by a concussion specialist, somebody who knows concussions, knows what to look for with the vestibular system, the visual system. They'll ask the right questions and they can kind of establish a baseline for where you're at, so that, again, if they do continue and symptoms don't go away, then when you see another doctor or whatever, they can go back and say, okay, this is where you were at right after the concussion.
Okay.
So that can be really helpful. And just kind of taking it easy for a day or two after is helpful and important.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. Like right after, something like that, the best thing to do would be take it easy.
And by take it easy, I actually had a conversation with somebody the other day, and they were told to just take it easy and figured, okay, I'll be out for a week or maybe two, and then I'll be fine. And it was not the case. That was not the case for them. But by take it easy, they were like, okay, I'll just lay down and watch TV and read books and do stuff. And we mean take it easy on your brain. So screens can be really challenging for people who've had concussions. So I would not recommend sitting and watching TV all day, or and reading. Again, reading can cause problems. So don't do a ton of that necessarily. Like take it easy physically and sensorily. Is that a word? Sensorily.
I like that word. If it's not real, it should be.
Right. Okay. Thank you. But basically kind of like, here's the thing that I want to be careful of. Sometimes people are told, avoid stimulation. Don't look at screens. Don't get in bright light. Don't be near loud noises. Just kind of hide away in a dark room. And that's what you need to do. And that can be helpful, again, for the first little bit, like a day or two. But you want your brain to have stimulation too. And physical activity can be really helpful. Again, if you're just starting back, doing like a walk even could be good. But like getting your heart rate going and doing things is the way to recover. And sometimes people, whether they were told specifically to do this or they just interpret it this way, sometimes people will just stay in a dark room with sunglasses on and headphones on, or earplugs in for months or more, because it's so painful and overstimulating to be in normal environments. And so like isolating yourself like that is not helpful for your brain and body healing or for your mental health, as I'm sure people can imagine. So yes. So don't do it for a long time, but for the first little bit afterwards, if that's what you need to do, that's a helpful thing to do.
What you just said makes perfect sense, because even, after some sort of a surgery or anything, people are told take it easy. But then if you just you get a knee replacement and then you just never use that leg, you're never going to get your mobility back. And it feels like that would be a similar thing. Like now you need to start using the brain. And yeah, like I talked about on other podcasts about how going for a walk and just the way that the eyes are scanning is helping the brain. So I'd imagine that even just walking, then your body's moving, blood's flowing, the eyes are connected to the brain really well. So yeah, this all makes a lot of sense. I like that.
Yes.
I like that.
Exactly right.
So yeah, I think that's really good. So then when you talked about post-concussion, was it syndrome or post-concussion? Okay. So then that's something that's going to be like 3 months down the road, you still have symptoms. what are those symptoms that you're looking for? Like what kind of things then when you're like, okay, this is more severe than, a bonk on the head that now after resting a little bit is feeling better. Like what are you looking for with that one?
Yeah, great question. And so some of them are similar, like that we mentioned before, the headaches, the dizziness, the nausea. There are different systems in our brain that can be affected that are underlying and impact everything, like the visual system and the
Mm-hmm.
vestibular system. So you can, like we said before, you can get those headaches, and they can be associated with reading or doing physical activities. A lot of people have issues with sleep, whether that's getting to sleep or staying asleep. And there's so many things. I'm gonna share with you a list of these symptoms, and some of them might surprise you. At least, I mean, you've done some research on it, so it might not surprise you, but
Mm-hmm.
they surprised me when I first heard about it. And I hear people say all the time, like, I had no idea this could be associated with a concussion. And I feel very passionately about getting this information out to people. So thank you for this opportunity,
Yes.
because people need to know. So it can affect sleep. It can have headaches. It can affect your focus and attention. So people who never had ADHD before might be feeling like they have ADHD all of a sudden. They have a really hard time concentrating. It can bring on depression and anxiety and increased irritability. Some people cry all the time, and some people don't cry ever. Like
Mm-hmm.
they have a totally flat affect. So either like more emotion than usual or almost no emotion at all. It can impact, like we said before, the reading and the visual system, your light and noise sensitivity. Little things can set you off, can like feel too overwhelming or overstimulating, or you can, like I said, you can get really frustrated and irritated by things that normally wouldn't bother you. And if you take a step back and realize, oh, actually it's that sound, that, or the tone of my dog's whining, or the beeping
Yes.
that's going on in the background that all of a sudden I'm aware of, those kinds of things can just set you off. Brain fog is a big thing, just not feeling like you have mental clarity. Balance can be impacted. And sometimes people who come into the clinic don't realize how bad their balance is. Like they're like, yeah, maybe I'm a little bit unsteady, but then they
Oh,
do actual
interesting.
balance tests, and they're
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, wow. Um, Word retrieval is a huge one. Not being able to come up with words they're trying to think of. Memory issues, and especially working memory, like the kind of the short term, like I'm doing something and I need to apply it over here and I can't remember what it was from just a minute ago. um, and then, like we said before, the fatigue aspect. And I guess this isn't necessarily a symptom, but it's something that gets impacted severely, and that's the social life. So people, because of all of this stuff, they're feeling so overwhelmed, so overstimulated, so tired, that going to a grocery store can be, the idea of going
Oh,
can just be totally overwhelming.
yeah.
All the
I'm just
lights, all
thinking of the
the
lights and the sounds and the
the
things like that
sounds.
at a grocery store. Yeah, I can
Hmm.
see that for
Well,
sure.
and the decision making too. Like that's like the executive function piece is really hard. So making people talk about having to pack for a trip and it taking 3 hours, whereas before it might have taken 30 minutes. Like, yeah, making decisions, trying to problem solve, all of that can just be really, really challenging and very disconcerting, because again, people don't feel like themselves anymore. They're like, I've lost
Yeah.
who I was. What is happening? Yeah.
Yeah. And everything you said pretty much like leads to what would have been my next question is how do concussions affect mental health? And I'm like, well, that's how they affect mental health. Like when you're like,
Yes.
I even like I used to be able to do this, or why is this so hard all of a sudden? And not
Hmm.
feeling like yourself, personality changes. In my mind, I kind of went to like, you get a concussion and then like, it's like, boom, you have anxiety. But like, you're just going to have anxiety about, I mean, going to the grocery
Yes.
store or any of those other things, making decisions. Decision fatigue is already a thing for so many people. If all of a sudden your
Hmm.
brain's just like, no, thank you.
Right.
Um, yeah, I can
Yeah.
definitely see how that would lead to a lot of one of there's a person that I follow on Instagram. I'll plug her too, just because her concussion, she talks about her concussion journey a lot. Her name is Melissa Urban. She was the creator of the Whole 30. I don't know if you know who she is,
Oh, cool.
but
I
she
didn't know
had a
that.
concussion she talks about it was like 3 years ago and talks about all of her concussion syndromes. And that was one of the things is she was just like, my personality changed. And that was hard as
Hmm.
like a public figure to just suddenly not feel like yourself. I can see that being so
That's,
hard. But it was interesting as you were like
yeah.
also naming those. I'm like, huh. Is
Introspective.
that because of my ADHD, or is that so I did in the fall, no, not fall, in the spring of 2022, I had a I hit my head. No, it was a concussion. There's no question I had a concussion. And it was like the week of my father-in-law's funeral. And so there wasn't a whole lot of like downtime recovery. But yeah, I kind of have always wondered because it was, about like kind of going into that fall and everything, that everything just really started to feel worse than before. So I felt like my mental
Yes.
health was tenuous. And then after that, it felt like the ways I'd learned to manage, the ways I'd learned to function and do things were like gone. Like,
That's really, really interesting. And
mhm.
yeah, it can absolutely, anything that was hard already is just magnified because
Yeah.
you have so much less capacity to handle things. So that makes a lot of sense that could
Yeah.
definitely impact it.
So before, when you were saying that the brain is awesome because it, kind of learns to be efficient,
Mhm.
does it like, is there like a known pathway that the brain functions, or is it just kind of like, oh, let's try here? Like, does that make sense? Like, does it all kind of go all to like the prefrontal? Well, if it all went to the prefrontal cortex, we'd be doing fantastic. So that's wrong. Is there like a kind of a path, like a common pathway that you see happening when the brain is like, let's try to be more efficient? Or does it just,
Mhm.
I mean, we're saying the brain is awesome, so I can't imagine it just guessing, but yeah,
Yes.
you're the
Good question.
specialist. Let me know.
No, those are really good questions. So the brain actually is, what with the concussion stuff, like I was saying, it actually goes to very inefficient pathways. But it's
Okay.
just because it's trying to get it done. It's still trying to accomplish the task, even if it's inefficient. And then we can get stuck in those inefficient patterns. And the clinic that I work at does, they call it FNCI, and it's kind of a functional MRI basically, but it's specific for them. It's so cool. So it's called cognitive FX, and it's in like the letter F and the letter X. It's in Provo, Utah, and they're the only ones who do exactly what they do, and they have special testing that they do, and they can look at the brain scans, and so they know. I can't tell you exactly what it looks like, but and every brain is slightly different, obviously, and so, but there are patterns
Mm-hmm.
to what concussion brains look like and the way that they function versus uh, typical brains, or like pre-concussion whatever brains. So
Yeah.
I don't know that there's a specific pathway that it necessarily goes to, but it
Okay.
just kind of goes where it can to make it happen.
To make it
And
work.
I think there
And
are patterns that happen.
so then that kind of made me think of another question, which would be, so when does it matter? I think I can answer this question, but I'm curious. Does it matter where you were hit? So like, or where, like you were even saying, not even hit.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you have whiplash, your brain's going to hit forward, that's prefrontal cortex, and maybe even back.
Mm-hmm.
So like, are there
Mm-hmm.
certain parts of the brain that are definitely going to show up more if they, if that they have, that's where the concussion is?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it pretty much all, no matter where you, like, because every part of the brain has a different function.
Right.
But, does that make sense? Like, is it like there's a
Yeah.
certain place you can bonk your head and be like, you'll be fine. But other ones, it's like, ooh, we really got to watch out for that one.
That's a good question and funny. Yes, there are, like, if you get hit in a specific place, then sometimes people will have more pain in that place, or if the visual system, if they got a direct hit to the back of their head,
The
then that might be
occipital,
more
yeah.
of a concern. Yeah. So there's different, um, every concussion is going to be unique, and it does
Mm-hmm.
depend on where they got hit. But there are, like I said, there are kind of global patterns that happen with a concussion, and depending on which area of the brain was most affected, that will
Yeah.
be more, it will change what the concussion looks like for that person.
Yeah.
But there
Okay.
are definitely overall patterns. And something that you brought up before, and that I think I should mention for sure, is that the mental health piece. Like, of course we're going to have anxiety. I don't feel like myself going to the store is going to hurt. Like, that is part of it. But also our nervous system gets dysregulated, and we can have, like, it's dysautonomia is that dysregulation of the nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, is something that doesn't get talked about a lot and is really important to be aware of, that you can feel, all of a sudden you can just feel anxious for no reason. It's your body, your brain is, your nervous system is picking up on something and viewing it as dangerous and ramping up into that fight or flight, like, action mode. And so
Yeah.
that can really kind of underlie all of this as well, is your nervous system just isn't functioning like it used to. And that takes awareness and practice to re-regulate. It is possible. And that's something I also want to just throw out here as well, that I think is really important for people to understand, that this, sometimes people are told, well, sorry, this is your new normal. Like, you've been dealing with this for 6 months. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. This is kind of, just get used to it. But
Mm-hmm.
that's not true. There are things you can do to heal your brain and to work towards improvement. And it's really important for people to know that, I think.
Okay. That actually leads me kind of into where I wanted to talk before, because that was the other thing. Like, I read a book once and it was like, if you hit your head when you were 3, you're going to have this. If and I'm just like, okay, so we're all in trouble. Like,
Yeah,
I'm
everybody's
sorry,
screwed.
like every little kid bonks their head. My oldest son had what I called the perpetual forehead bruise from the time he like started moving, which is,
Right.
crawling, just running into things. And I'm like, well, I guess it's up for him. So knowing that there is something you can do, which I think is really cool. So yeah, I'd heard that there's, like, well, first of all, you said a concussion specialist. Is that usually a neurologist, as far as like a physician? Is it a neurologist? Like, how do you go about finding a concussion specialist? Because most people will go to an emergency room, and I have very much respect for ER docs because they are dealing with all of it.
All of the things.
All
Yep.
of the things. But, they're probably going to be the ones that are like, yep, it's a concussion, go home, lie down, be in the dark, hopefully
Mm-hmm.
they refer you to somebody. But yeah, so are all neurologists going to be concussion specialists, or is it better to find like an occupational therapist that deals with concussions? Like, what is the best path to go if you have a concussion, or,
Yes.
suspect a concussion?
That's a really, really good question. I would say, like, do a Google search for concussion specialists in your
Yes.
area. And that can be, I mean, there are some chiropractors who do this kind of stuff and know the protocols to do research on. There are people, there are occupational therapists, physical therapists. There are speech therapists who focus on concussions. And I don't know, there are a lot of concussion clinics out there too,
Mm-hmm.
that you can look up. So, and some neurologists do know concussions well, and some neurologists don't. Again, I hear stories from so many patients who come in and they're like, my neurologist told me this, and it doesn't
Yeah.
seem to fit with what we know. So, so I would say try to find somebody who does focus on concussions specifically. And I would throw out there too, athletic trainers are probably also very qualified to look at this.
Yes.
So,
I would really hope so, because that's the thing that just, blows my mind. Because, yeah, again, back in the day, football players, it was like, you got your bell rung pretty bad. Get back out there.
yep.
And now,
Yeah.
when my boys played soccer, if they headed the ball before the age of, I want to say 14, they were pulled out of the game.
Really? Really?
Yeah. Like, just heading the
Probably a
ball,
good thing.
which I remember thinking, can that be really just a little softball?
Right.
But I have heard that, yeah, and with the young brains, it really can.
Mhm.
So I like that,
Yeah.
they are taking those precautions to take care of young skulls, young brains now, which is really cool. So
It is good.
this then leads me, so I asked about the specialist. So as a neurological occupational therapist, as you are, what are some of the things that you do to help people recover from concussions? Because I really want to believe there is something you can do. Because, yeah, I struggle to be like, sorry, that's it for you. And also the nervous system regulation. That's the other one that,
Mhm.
like, to just be like, well, I just feel like, a lion's chasing me all the time. Oh, well, that's no way to live. We can't live
Yes.
that way. So it's got, I really want to believe there's something we can do. So I love that there's people like you that do this. So as a
Thanks.
neurological occupational therapist, what are the things that you do for this?
Yeah. Oh, such a great question. And yes, there are things that you can do. Even we at this clinic that I work at, we see people who've had concussions and have been dealing with symptoms for 20 plus years. Like, it doesn't matter how long ago it was, you can still have improvement. So I just want to throw that out there too. There is a lot of hope. um,
Yay. I love that
And
word.
yes, it's a good word. And there are a few things, there's a lot of things obviously, but some of the key things that I feel there are some things that we can talk about. And then there's like the clinic, again, the clinic that I work at, I am a huge proponent of them. If you are dealing with major issues that you've had for a really long time, I would 100% call them and they have a free consultation. And the program there is so good, and they're constantly working like to improve. I've worked there for over 6 years, and from when I started to where it is now, it's not totally different, but like the core is the same, but they've added things that are just really, really helpful for people, and they're constantly looking to improve. So I would totally check them out if that is something that you are concerned about. And it's like, that program is 1 to 2 weeks of like 8 to 5 therapies and rest breaks and things like that. And it's really, really powerful and really does a lot to reset the brain. It's kind of like going to the doctor. They like reset the bone, and then you continue healing from then. So it can really like help people get on the path to recovery.
And you said the name of that clinic, but let's say it again.
Yeah. Cognitive FX. Their
Cognitive
website is
FX. Okay.
CognitiveFXUSA.com is their website. And they have amazing testimonials and an amazing blog with awesome, like such a good resource. If you have any questions about this, I was looking up like depression and concussions on their blog, and they've got lots of good articles. So I would totally recommend people check them out. And that's for like, that will be really, really helpful. And a lot of the things that I do with people and is stuff that I've learned through them. But here are some general kind of principles, things that help to improve, to help with that recovery from a concussion. So one that is really important, and I think this is something that whether you've recently had a concussion or you're dealing with symptoms or you've had treatment and you're on the recovery side of it, this is really important. And that's listening to your body, getting familiar with your body, and creating some kind of like gauge system, basically like recognizing what symptoms are telling you, like usually people have a point where they can't do anymore. Like, and there's often a symptom that they feel coming on that kind of is a trigger, a warning to them that I'm about to be totally done. And so knowing what that is, knowing what it feels like when you're in like that red zone of like, nope, I'm not doing anything else. What does that feel like? And then knowing, okay, if I'm doing okay and I'm feeling all right, but I am starting to get symptoms, what does that feel like versus what does totally okay feel like? So just being really aware of that physical and mental, emotional state is really important, because then you can take rest breaks before you get to that further stage where you have to shut down. So being aware of your body and listening to it and giving yourself the permission to take care of yourself. That's something that's really hard for a lot of people, as they just want to push through, or they just want to do this thing, or they don't want to miss out on this thing, or they feel bad because their friends are going to be upset that they've missed this, right?
Yeah.
So they push themselves beyond what their body is willing and able to let them do, and then they pay for it for a really long time. So getting familiar with your body and your brain and your nervous system states, and taking the time before it gets really bad to rest and take care of yourself is huge. And really, really, really important. And I think something that can help, oh man, I have so many thoughts. I'm like, okay, we're focusing.
I love it. No, I love it. When it's something you know a lot about and you're passionate about, you're like, okay, wait, how do I, you want to share it all.
Exactly. Tell everything to everybody. So yeah, being aware of where you're at and taking care of yourself and taking those rest breaks, just as another like side note, but it is applicable. People often want to know what to do to get better. And we have lots of things to do to get better that we can tell you. But the rest, the recovery, the like giving your brain a chance to destimulate and just recover is key to those doing activities being effective. And since it feels like not doing when you're resting, people tend to just shove that one aside. But it really it creates the space for all of the things that you're doing to take effect. And so it really is really important. So if you have a concussion, I'm begging you to take care of yourself.
Well, and
in
when
that
you
way.
said destimulate, I have to like throw this out as the mother of teens. They think that means I'll just get on my phone and play a game or whatever.
Mhm.
It probably means not the screens, I'm guessing.
Yes,
I'm just gonna
usually.
I'm guessing not the screens. And I'm actually curious too, because whenever I want my kids off the screens, I tell them to read because I'm an avid reader. I love to read. I'm like, go grab a book and read. But is that also kind of a little too stimulating? Or I guess I'm very curious how we advise, ourselves, because let's be honest, it's probably ourselves we have to regulate. But, again,
Yes.
I know there's a lot of mothers, I've actually talked to quite a few moms of football players and, soccer players and everything that are like, they said they're supposed to rest. So they're like, I got it. I'll just watch my phone.
Exactly.
They don't they
Yes.
don't know how to rest without it. And so I'm curious to know, what can we tell them to do?
Mhm. That is a really good question. So sometimes reading, it depends on where you're at. If reading causes more symptoms for you, I would not recommend that.
Mhm.
If it doesn't, then that can be a very like calming, like if you can get into a flow with it, right, and it helps you to relax, then go for it.
Mhm.
But again, I would say pay attention to your body. Generally, doing something on a screen is not going to be relaxing and
Yes.
destimulating. So,
Mhm.
but there's an app on phones, as I know on the iPhone it's called 35 binaural beats, I believe that is called. It's brainwaves.
Mhm.
And there's some on the on Androids as well. But if you can download that, I mean that's on a phone, but you're not watching the screen. You
Yeah.
have to have headphones for it, but it can help. That like kind of forces your brain
Yeah.
to destimulate.
I'm
So
a
that
I'm
can
a
be effective.
big fan of binaural beats, like
Awesome.
big fan. So, and yeah, I've seen the effects in like real time with my daughter. She couldn't sleep one night, just like overstimulated. She put in headphones, like she came in the morning. She's like, I didn't even sleep. Put on my headphones and turn on binaural beats, and like I just watched her just like. So
That's awesome.
she's like, that's
Yes.
amazing. So I'm a big fan. So that's good to know, because I guess that's it.
Fantastic.
Like they also always want to have headphones in and be listening to something. So I think if I could just try this, that would be
Yes.
nice.
That
Okay.
might be something that they can do. Also, just, bringing things to the present moment is a really helpful way to destimulate. It's that mindfulness piece where you're like, okay, what can I see in my environment right now? You can go through your five senses, like what can I
Hmm.
taste? What am I smelling? What am I hearing? And just like being present helps you to calm the system down.
Okay,
Um,
that's really helpful too, because I think that's one of the
yeah.
things. We also live in a really go 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 society, so telling
Yes.
people to rest, they almost don't know how. Like,
Yes. It's so
I
true.
remember coming home from class in college, and I'd lie on my couch, my bed, and look out my window at the mountain, and like no one would ever do that now. There's too many other things to do.
Yes. Well, and
I
I
I
like that you
don't do that
mentioned.
now.
Yeah, no, seriously. And I like that you mentioned the mountain because nature can be really helpful as well. Just going out on a walk in nature and being there, notice the sounds, the sights, the breeze, right? Like
Hmm.
being present in nature can be really helpful. And this is maybe a little bit of a side note, but not entirely. When we're talking about destimulation and regulating the nervous system, there are five kind of core pillars, and I got these from Leah Davidson. I don't know if you've heard of her or not, but she's
Hmm.
really awesome. I
Yeah.
really love her
I
and the
actually
work
just
she's
listened to
doing.
your podcast with her and then Jody's podcast with her. And I'm now like,
Awesome.
because I'm very like, yeah, again, my nervous system is kind of likes to go into overdrive. So I'm like, okay, I need to do that. Her course. Like, let's
Her,
go.
yes.
That's
Yes, I
amazing.
love her course. I'm in it and I'm loving it, loving everything that I'm learning. But she talks about these five core pillars that are kind of foundational for mental and emotional and physical health. And I just throw them out there and then I can get back to some of those other things to
Hmm.
recover from a head injury. But those are sleep, which again can be challenging with people who've had a concussion, but sleep is really important. Sunlight, so getting 5 to 30 minutes of sunlight, as soon as you can in the morning and then again at dusk can be really helpful to establish that circadian rhythm and is good for our bodies and our psyche. Movement, so regular exercise, and we'll talk about some specific movements that are helpful for concussion. And then nutrition and hydration, always important, and relationships. So relationship with yourself, with other people, and with your higher power. Those are really important just generally for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
but can be really key to having a regulated nervous system. And there's always ways that we can improve in all of those. But knowing that those are like key foundational, if any of them is like super out of whack, you want to focus on that before you try doing all this other stuff, because yeah, it's foundational. So
I love that. Those are, yeah, those are awesome. That's great.
it's good information. So just throwing that out there. But on the topic of things that we can do to help with healing from concussions, something that has been really interesting and surprising and kind of more recently implemented at the clinic that I work at is essentially high intensity interval training.
Oh.
So high intensity intervals, it's super interesting because, and the way that they do it at the clinic is maybe a little bit different, but than they do at, the YouTube videos that you can look up.
Mm-hmm.
But the general idea is you want to get your nervous system, or you want to get your system up and running, right? Like you want to get your heart rate high, and then you want to stop and let it calm down. And that process is, it's good for your cardio, but it's also really helpful for your nervous system, because it shows your nervous system, this is what it feels like to be anxious. Like it feels similar to being anxious, right? It's like your heart
Mm-hmm.
rate is up, your blood is pumping, you're breathing hard, all of that stuff is happening. And then you do breathing techniques and you calm the system down, and it's training your nervous system to be able to do that, which is really, really cool. And people that I talk to who've done who do that and have learned how to do it, and they say that it makes a huge difference. People who've had concussions, it can really help with decreasing brain fog and like have more mental clarity and just decreasing symptoms. So doing that can be really helpful. So that's one. And then generally, like another just kind of generalized thing is doing multisensory activities where you're engaging your eyes and your ears and your body. And when I say body, I mean using your body in a way that forces your brain to pay attention to what your body is doing. So doing something while you're balancing, or like doing something that's challenging your balance while you're doing something with your eyes and your ears at the same time, or using your non-dominant hand to do things, or doing things slightly differently than you normally do, because our brains like to establish habits. And so if you're doing something, walking sideways instead of forwards, like your brain's like, wait, what's happening right now? So doing things like that can be really helpful.
Yeah.
And life will give you a lot of those kinds of multisensory experiences, especially
Mm-hmm.
children. They're great therapists. They will give you all of the noise and the light and all of the
Mm-hmm.
stimulation that you need. But doing those things, especially after you've done the work to help reestablish those proper pathways, can
Yeah.
be reinforcing of the good that you've done for your brain.
Okay. Yeah. I like that. That sounds, those are, I didn't, based on just a little bit that I know, that makes sense. But I really like the high intensity part, because I think it just makes it, kind of you telling your nervous system you're the boss.
Mm-hmm.
That's just
Yes,
what I got out of that.
exactly.
Like
You
I
can
can,
experience it. It's not the end of the world. It's going to be
and then I
okay.
can
And
calm
this is
it
what you can do.
down instead of
Yeah,
just kind of letting it just run wild like a toddler with the Sharpie. So
exactly.
yeah, I like
Exactly.
that. That's one of my favorite analogies too, the toddler with the Sharpie. I love that.
It's a terrifying thing. But yes,
Terrifying.
it is really a good analogy.
So
Can I throw something else out there,
yes,
actually?
please.
With destimulation stuff, something else that is kind of that I've learned about that is really, really cool to me is breathing. And like when we breathe in, that stimulates the sympathetic nervous system, which is that activated, like hyper
Mm-hmm.
aroused system. And when we breathe out, that stimulates the parasympathetic, which is more of that like rest and digest, the calming system. And they're
Mm-hmm.
both, we need all of it. But knowing that if we breathe in and we're having if we take in lots of quick or rapid in breaths, like inhales, that
Mm-hmm.
stimulates that system. That kind of wakes us up. That's why, if we're nervous, it's like, right? we
Yeah.
naturally do that. And if we're calm and relaxed, we have a longer exhale. It's like a deep breath in, and then a longer breath out. That helps to calm the system. And so you can use your breath to activate or not deactivate, but like calm down the system.
Yeah.
It's just really powerful, and practicing it in moments when you don't need it is the way to master that skill. But it is really, really powerful and really interesting to me. There's one in particular that has been shown to be very effective, which is called the physiological sigh, which is where you do two, you've heard of it, yeah, I see you nodding.
Yeah.
You do 2 in breaths and then a long out breath through your mouth. So 2 in breaths through your nose and then long one out through your mouth. And doing that can really, again, help calm the system down. And it's powerful stuff. It's good.
I like that. Well, and it's like when I was doing, yoga and breath training, that's, you focus on like you breathe out longer than you breathe in. It'll like breathe in 4, hold 2, out 6,
Yes.
so that makes perfect sense now that exhale is really what's calming the body, bringing you into that parasympathetic nervous system, which is really cool. I kind of love it when like something you've learned is then like explained by science. You're like, oh, that's why we do that.
Yes. That's what I feel like with this class from Leah Davidson. She's bringing all these things in that I've heard here, and she's just putting it all together. I'm like, oh, it all makes sense. It all comes together. It's really, really good.
That's so cool. So then also you are a life coach, and so you're the concussion coach. So with your life coach, concussion coach clients, what kind of work do you do with them there? Because I know, the thought work and all that kind of stuff. Like, I guess I'm just really curious to know, because it sounds so brilliant. Because not only are you that, we deal with the physical issues of a concussion, but obviously you've got the mental issues, and that has to be dealt with in some ways too. So I'm very curious, when you have your concussion coaching clients, how do you coach them? How does that go?
Yes. Thanks for asking. It's a great question. So there are things, and some of them we've talked about already, but things that I do to really try to help the person understand what's going on for them. And again, with this information that I've been learning from Leah, like really establishing, getting familiar with your own nervous system and understanding what's happening there and what to do to establish safety, like to tell your brain and your nervous system, it's okay, we're not in danger. And because that's the problem there, it's sensing danger and kind of going all over the place. So we work on ways to destimulate, ways to bring your nervous system down to get more regulated. And we talk about, that gauge system to recognize when your body needs rest. And an important part too with the nervous system regulation is when we're regulated, then we have access to our higher thinking brain and we can do the thought work. But when we're activated or super low and like depressed, and we lose access to that, we don't think clearly, we're not able to necessarily get as much benefit out of running models and things like that as we would if we were regulated. So that's really key. I want to teach people about their nervous system and how to handle that. And then I guess I should define what running models means. I don't know if your listeners are all.
I know. I was actually going to say, I can't remember if I've mentioned in episodes before. I think I just a couple episodes ago, I went through just like the C line, just started with kind of breaking it down. But yes, we can definitely talk about what the model is, because it's awesome.
It is awesome. So yeah, the model is Brooke Castillo came up with it. It's very similar to cognitive behavioral theory. There's a lot of things. It's basically truth, but I like the way that she packages it, and she calls it the model. It's the one that Jody Moore uses. There's a lot of life coaches now who use this way of teaching thought work, basically. So that it's been interesting, because when I very first started, I was like, oh, I know the model. It solves all the problems. And then I work with concussion patients who are dysregulated. I'm like, wait, okay, they're not having access to their thinking brain. So we need to calm the system down. We need to do this part first, and then we can really teach how do we want to think about this, because both are key and really, really important. Because like you said, when people are not feeling like themselves and they have all of these, that like a lot of fear and anxiety about, not even just, can I get to the store today, but if I can't do this, what is my future going to look like? Am I ever going to get better? Like there's grief a lot. Like there's a loss of who I was or what I was able to do. And like it changes everything. And it can be really, really disconcerting, and like just feel like the rug is just pulled out from under you. And so there's important things to talk about with how we want to frame things, how we want to think about it. And again, always coming back to that, like, I'm okay, and like loving me, learning how to love yourself where you are. And it's just, there's a lot of the thought work, the mental work, as well as that, the emotional piece and the physical piece. It's all applicable. It all comes together here. And I really, really love doing it. Actually, can I throw out this really fast?
Yes.
If it's okay to put a plug in for one of my podcast episodes, if anybody is struggling with feeling like their life is turned upside down, I did an interview with Meg Johnson, and she's a person who's had a spinal cord injury, and she's a motivational speaker. She's really, really good at what she does. And she talks about that experience of having, like, learning to love yourself when you don't, basically when you don't feel like yourself anymore, like your whole life has changed. She does a really good job of that. But anyway, that's kind of what I focus on as a concussion coach.
That makes perfect sense, because I went through that phase too. Like, life coaching to me, I felt like was such a tangible, useful tool, because, you go to therapy and you just talk and talk and talk. But then when you can actually like look at your thoughts, question them, it all made perfect sense. But I was so dysregulated that the way that I tried to explain it is it just felt like it couldn't permeate like this shell that my nervous system had put up. And so I mean, I could run models, I could do all the thought work, but there was just a sticking point. And I 100% know that that's what it was. And it isn't until, so I really think that idea of like actually getting to a place where you're more regulated, and then, because even like questioning thoughts, or looking at my thoughts, or just being like, oh, there it is. Like, that's what that is. It's, not even like, trying to change it was anxiety ridden. Like, well, that's my thought. Is that my thought? What's happening? Like, it wasn't, it just caused way too much. And then it'd be like, you get all the way to the end. So it's circumstances create your thoughts, or sorry, your thoughts about the circumstances are what create your emotion, basically, and then that emotion creates your action, or creates an action, which creates a result. Did I do that?
Yep, you did that.
Emotion. I said emotion. Feelings, the word they use is feeling, but basically the same thing. And I would just get to like the result and be like, okay, I guess that's my result. Because it just felt so impossible to even do anything about it. Like, I'm sorry, this is my thought, this is my feeling, we're stuck. And I felt like I was just stuck in a loop because of that constant state of anxiety. Like when you talked about that feeling, like I remember there being a state where like it was just clockwork. Like all of a sudden I just felt anxious and there was nothing. And I remember, well, there's got to be a thought. There's got to be a thought creating this anxiety. What's the thought? What's the thought? I could never find the thought. I'm like, and I'd do the, I'm okay, I'm safe, everything's safe. And I couldn't get it to go away. And so I definitely feel like this, learning, and even just sometimes going, my circumstances, I have a concussion and that's creating this anxiety in me, I think could be very powerful to somebody. Just knowing I have this, physical, I don't want to call it illness. I don't know what I want to call it. Physical impairments? Injury.
Physical thing, injury.
Injury.
Good idea.
I like the idea of injury because that sounds recoverable. Injury sounds like something that we can do something about. So I really, I like that. So I will make sure that I get that podcast episode and your podcast and the website to the Provo clinic where you work all in the show notes so everybody can see that. One more question. This sounds, I'm just curious because another thing that I have talked a lot about is like natural supplements. So you talked about nutrition. Another one that had come up a lot in concussion recovery was omega-3 fatty acids. Is that anything that you've ever heard about? Is that something that you do talk about, or that, the clinic or you recommend for people? Because I had heard that that's actually a really good one too for concussion recovery.
Yes, I've heard that as well. I haven't dived into the nutrition part of it, but that nutrition definitely plays a part. And I have heard that the omega-3s can be really helpful for brain injury recovery.
Okay.
Yes. So sorry, I don't have a lot more information.
No, that's okay. It's and it's interesting because that's another one I need to dive into more is nutrition, because you hear all the time how much it's helpful with like everything. And it's right. Like, what if what I just want is a cupcake?
all I really want.
And there's like all the reasons why that's not good for your brain and your body and your mental health. You're like, but it will make me feel good now. So yeah, I'm just curious if you knew anything more about that. But honestly, I think even just recognizing that it, even if you don't know when you hit your head or if you hit your head or if it was whiplash, even if just recognizing that maybe it's a brain injury, like maybe that's what's causing the problem, and cool that you can work on it. And I think what's cool is a lot of the things that you talked about are even like, maybe even if it's not a brain injury, this regulating the nervous system, breathing, all of that is still so helpful. And, learning to rest, learning to stop and rest. And that rest shouldn't necessarily include a screen.
Amen, sister.
I know, right? Oh, if only we could. It's, oh boy, these teenagers, and they will argue with you. You are wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, you're crazy. And it's like, okay. You kind of can't. The only way they'll learn is for them to be parents. And by then it might be too late, but it's fine.
So anyway. Funny. Can I say a couple things that came up as you were saying that real quick?
Absolutely. Please.
Okay. So one, I love that you pointed out that these things are helpful and true for everybody. And that's something when I first started doing coaching from that Be Bold Masters program that you and I did together where we first met, that was just like lit me on fire. I was like, coaching is my purpose in life. Like I just felt so called to being a coach. But then I didn't know what to do, like what my niche should be. And I started out as a family relationships coach because I really am passionate about helping people with relationships. And then it felt like a God thing. It was like directed to doing this concussion coaching. And I was really resistant to it at first. And I think part of it was like, I don't want to get narrowed into this, but the more I do this, the more I'm like, okay, people with concussions are people who have all kinds of things going on. Like we get to work on all of the things, but also the stuff that's helpful for people with concussions is helpful for everybody. So what I'm learning just really does apply. It really is broadly applicable and helpful. So I love that aspect of this stuff. And, two more really quick things. One, the nutrition piece. If people want more information, I know there is, again, on the blog for Cognitive FX, they have a whole article on nutrition for head injuries that could be helpful.
Good.
And they have a nutrition coach that works there as well. So I might need to chat with her and learn more myself.
And then not already learning everything.
I want to learn everything, and there's so much to learn, right? And then the last thing that I think is really helpful, I feel like it's helpful, and hopefully it'll be helpful for your listeners, is when we recognize that our nervous system, like Leah talks about, the model is circumstances, thoughts, feelings, actions, results. And there's kind of a space between circumstances and thoughts, which is our nervous system state. And that nervous system state really impacts the way that we think and the way that we feel. Like all of the things get filtered through that lens of our nervous system. And so that's why we can be like, yeah, I know my thought's creating this, but I can't stop thinking it. Or like, and it really is helpful to recognize that as, it's the lens that is physiological. There's not a moral judgment. Like you're not a bad person because you can't drop this thought, or you're not like, there's nothing wrong with you because you're feeling anxious all of a sudden and you can't come up with what it is that you're anxious about. Like it's physiological. It's biology. Your body is just doing this because it is sensing danger in some way, whether that, and it can be from all kinds of things. It can be triggered from like seeing something that reminds you of something that is subconscious, right? Like or it can be, there's so many different things, like cues from other people, like you're not feeling like things are good between you and you can't even put your finger on it, but there's something, right? Like our system is made to protect us, and it reacts that way. And it may or may not be accurate. Like it may be reading something into this that may or may not be true. But regardless, it's releasing the same chemicals into your brain and body, and those need to be processed and addressed, and then you can kind of address the other things. And it doesn't take away all of our agency or ability to make choices, but it really helps to understand that the reason this is so hard is not because I have a moral failing. It's physiological. So I think that's important to be.
I think that's important again for everything, but especially, with mental health, one of the hardest things to deal with is for people to understand your brain is sick. there's not something wrong with you. You're not like fundamentally flawed. You're not a bad person. You're not like, I hear, people seem to apologize for whatever. And it's like, your brain is sick. And again, that emotional dysregulation, any of that kind of stuff, it's just, and who knows where it's coming from, why something could have happened to lead you to that. Or maybe that's just what your body does, and it's again, it's not a moral failing. It's none of that. It's just your body, your brain is sick. And again, sickness sometimes is chronic and we deal with it, but we deal with it and we work on ways to feel better and get better and do better. But also we maybe just need to even accept like, maybe this is the new normal and I just have to do these things to regulate my nervous system. And maybe I do have to work harder than other people, but nobody knows. That's the other thing, is nobody really knows what other people's struggles are. And that's the thing about concussions, is that it's an invisible injury. It's an invisible, so many of these invisible illnesses are really hard for people because, if you've got something, broken arm, broken leg, any of that stuff, people are going to kind of move heaven and earth and help you. And let's do this and that for you. But if you have to try to explain it's my brain,
yes,
it's exhausting. And so
yes.
giving yourself that grace that it's just kind of part of things, I think is a really good piece for people to understand with all invisible illnesses. But yeah, I think this information is so helpful because I really do believe probably everybody has suffered a concussion at some time.
I know, right?
and not even noticed what side effects it had. And maybe it didn't do much, or maybe it's, kind of still causing some nervous system havoc. So I think this is really helpful information and ways to treat that. So thank you so much, Bethany. This is amazing. I'll make sure I put all that information in the show notes so you guys can have it. And anything else you want to add, Bethany, before we go?
Oh man, I love everything that you just said. And thank you so much for the opportunity to do this. I feel very passionately about this.
I love it.
But yeah, something that you said there at the end, I think, a couple of thoughts really fast. Just the acceptance piece it can be so hard. It can be so hard. I see it over and over and over again because it feels like your identity has changed and it's really, really hard. But I've talked to so many people who have told me that the acceptance of this is where I am right now is the thing that allowed for the healing to begin for real.
Oh, that's good.
It's powerful. It's so powerful.
Because we want to resist that. We want to be like, no, we want to
resist it.
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm still me. Everything's fine. Yes. Everything's fine. If I don't need to. Yeah, I totally get that. Yeah, and
feeling like you think that accepting it means that you're giving up or you're giving in, like that, and that's not what it is. It's okay. This is where I am right now, and then we have a chance to move forward. Because otherwise, we're stuck in a place that we're not. Right? Like we think that we should be something else than we are, and then we can't move forward and work with what we have. So I think that's really important. And then I love that you addressed the piece of the invisible injury. Again, something that I talk to people a lot about, and I ask them in the interviews that I do with them is like, what's something that you've learned from this experience? And a lot of times they talk about it being an invisible injury and just how it's helped them to have so much compassion for other people, because we really don't ever know what other people are suffering with. And it can be, it's seeing that and talking to so many people with this, it really does make me want to give everybody a free pass. Like, I'm so sorry you're having such a hard time. Like, and it does, like, it helps me to feel better if I can be like, I'm sorry you're struggling so much, because clearly something's not right there. Like whatever it is, like you're feeling unsafe in some way, and that's why you're responding this way. And I love you and I'm sorry. Like it allows for so much more compassion for yourself and for others when you can recognize that these invisible injuries are there, and it doesn't mean anything bad about that person.
Yes, absolutely.
It's part of the human existence.
That's the other key is compassion and acceptance are key to really moving forward in any illness. Anything in life is just compassion for yourself and for others, and acceptance of yourself and others. That's kind of how we are able to just start. So
yes, amen.
Well, thank you so much. And I am so happy that we got to have this conversation, and we'll hopefully talk to you soon.
Thanks so much. It's been really, really wonderful to talk to you today, Wendy. I'm so glad you listened in today. I hope you have gained some helpful insights and inspiration regarding dealing with and recovering from concussions. My goal is to create more awareness and education about concussions and the fact that there is so much that can be done to improve life after someone has had one. Help me spread the message by liking, commenting, rating, and subscribing to this podcast, and share it with others who would benefit from hearing it. There are more resources available on my website. And again, if you or someone you love would benefit from concussion coaching, sign up for a free consultation using the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Thank you. See you next time, and take good care of that amazing brain of yours.